So lovely to be here. I wish we were in person at the library, but I'm very happy to be here. So I'm John Killacky. I am a Caucasian, pale-skinned, balding man with clear glasses. I have a dark blue sweater on and a blue plaid shirt on, and behind me is my white office wall and a lamp. So it's pretty minimal behind me, and I'm really honored to be here as part of the Vermont Humanities First Wednesdays program. It's such a great thing that comes across the state. So tonight I'm going to be talking about becoming disabled at midlife. And I'm also going to talk about my new book, because there's some of those writings about disability in the book. And as Michelle said, it's called Because Art. So we're going to go back to 1996. And I was dozing in bed, and my husband Larry was reading beside me, and I felt this electric current pass through my body. And Larry told me I started having like convulsions for like 15 seconds or so. I remember just that he was kind of pressing on my chest, calling my name. So a couple days later, we went to the doctors. They said, "Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's too serious. You better get an MRI though." So we did go get an MRI, and we found that I had a tumor inside my spinal cord up at C2, so pretty high up, and it was blocking 60% of the cord. So it was in the cord, so we couldn't do a biopsy to see if it was benign or malignant. We also, because it was in the cord, they said, well, really the best solution is surgery, and you should be in the hospital 3 or 4 days, sore neck for a month, and you'll be fine, and we'll get it out. So this was 1996, so I'm kind of remembering things from a long time ago. But what I do remember, though, so vividly, is it was dark out when we went there in the morning, and I was put under anesthesia, I'm told, about 7:30. But what I remember is Larry was with me in the room as they hooked me up to the anesthesia. They laid me down, and they start moving the cart, and I remember the lights on the ceiling as I was moving and holding Larry's hand as I was losing consciousness. And it was what's in the disability world called pre-morbid. There's pre-morbid and post-morbid. So that was really my last pre-morbid moment. So about 8 hours later, Larry is met by the surgeon in the waiting room. He said, all the vitals are fine. I'm done. I'm going to go home, and John should be, you'll be able to see him in a little bit. So about an hour later or so, Larry went to the desk and asked one of the nurses, well, where's John? And they go, oh my God, we kind of forgot. Come back in. And it's something they probably shouldn't have done, because Larry found me still in this surgical room post-op, but they hadn't cleaned me up, so I was just covered in blood and iodine, and the cage was still screwed into my head to hold my head in the surgery. And he said I was just screaming kind of incoherently, and I was paralyzed from the neck down. So the next couple of days were very difficult to figure out what was going on. I had all these drugs. I was in the intensive care unit, and spirit, heart, and mind kind of imploded as the morphine and the fear and the pain all kind of colluded with it, and exploded. I was paralyzed from the neck down, couldn't move anything, not a finger. Mind and body were totally separate. I would try to think, how can I move a finger? Nothing would happen. And my left side was very spastic, so it would be jerking all the time. I couldn't stop the jerking. So in this body, I would lay there and I would fantasize about how could I get to the window and break the glass and slit my throat. You know, Dawn was the worst because Larry was sleeping on the floor next to me, and but he'd be asleep, and I kind of would just stare at the world and whimper and cry. It's like I didn't know what to do, and improvement was so small. When they first would take me to kind of therapy, which I wasn't doing very much, they'd say, well, you know, let's talk about short-term goals. And I said, well, I'm going to walk again. And they go, no, well, John, let's start with things that are achievable. Let's see if we can work on your fingers or your toes first. And the therapist told me I had to get over the idea that I was going to re-enter life as I had known it, no matter how much mobility came back. And the sooner I accepted this kind of adaptive behavior, the better off I was going to be in my rehab. So denial was pretty profound. I remember one Sunday night, Christopher Reeve, the actor who, if you remember, Superman, right? He rode horses, jumping horses, and he got injured in a horse jumping accident, and he was quadriplegic. But he was being interviewed on television about all the work he was now doing. And the next day, my doctors came in and they were doing rounds, and they were just saying, so how was your weekend? And I said, oh my God, I saw poor Christopher Reeve interviewed last night. Isn't it sad? And they kind of looked at each other, the doctors, and said, well, what do you mean, John? And I said, well, he's quadriplegic. Well, there was a pause, and one of my doctors spoke up and said, oh, what do you think you are, John? And it hadn't been given a name yet. I didn't know what it meant. So I did find out that I had what's called Brown-Séquard syndrome. And because the spinal thing was at C2, what that normally means is that the right side of my body has no sensation or any temperature, and the left side of my body has lost proprioception, which is a sense of location. So many people at that time in 1996 who had this were either shot or stabbed in the spine, and many did not walk again, and the life expectancy was about 2 years. So it was kind of a daunting kind of diagnosis for me. I remember my first trip out of the bed. They picked me up and they put me in a wheelchair, and they said, well, you know, while you're here, you can weekly go visit a therapist. And I said, well, that sounds great, you know. So I remember being rolled into her office, and immediately she started complaining about her arthritis, which I thought was kind of odd, but, you know, but I was okay, you know. And she said, well, what's on your mind? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, this is kind of new to me. And I'm interested to know about the return of sexual function in spinal cord injury. And that psychologist working in a rehab hospital said to me, I really don't know, I'm not gay. And I said, well, I didn't ask you if you were gay. You asked me what was on my mind, and I told you what's on my mind. You work in a rehab hospital. You must have some experience with this. And she said, no, I really don't. And I said, okay, we're done. I said, please get the orderly, come get me. She said, well, you know, anger is a good thing. I said, we're done. You're incompetent. And so I got wheeled back to my room, and I did report her the next day. So on the ward I'm at, there were patients with strokes and brain and spinal injuries. And I really, really resisted being in group situations. I didn't want to identify with people. I felt safer in my denial. And seeing people worse off than me somehow made me feel less sorry for myself, unless someone more mobile than me came in the room. And then I was more devastated again. What I was noticing is that injuries to patients in their 20s were called tragic. Back then I was in my 40s, so I saw people in my age range were called heroic, dealing with these issues. And I had a roommate who was in his 70s, and I heard them, that age group, referred to as unfortunate. So it's interesting, from tragic to heroic to unfortunate were the terms that I saw. Now, originally I was in an intensive care unit, and then after about 10 days, I was transitioned into the full rehab hospital. And I still couldn't move anything. And that day, I remember every time they moved me, I was like, when they picked me up to put me in a wheelchair, I'd get very lightheaded, and I would faint, or they would wheel me down to try to do some rehab, and I was fainting in the chair. And so I just was very unstable. Since I wasn't in intensive care anymore, that was the first night Larry went home. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. And what I found out afterward is that all the steroids I was on and all the anti-inflammatory drugs, I was internally hemorrhaging, and I wasn't aware of it. That's why I was so lightheaded, apparently. But in the middle of the night, no one was there, and I woke up and there was like all this fluid in my throat, like blood was in my throat. And I thought, I mean, I couldn't move anything, so I couldn't go press a button, the bell for the one of the nurses to come. So I lay there and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to choke to death. And I thought, well, okay, how do you go into your death? And I was completely helpless. So luckily, the night nurse was doing her rounds, and she came and looked down at me. I kind of wide-eyed, I kind of gurgled and made noises, and all the lights went on, and she called all the people in, and she kept saying, stay conscious, John, stay conscious, stay conscious. And I kept saying, just get Larry, please get Larry. And she said, well, no, this was the first night, because they loved him. He was sleeping on the floor all the time. He said, this is the first night he went home. He'll be home. He'll be back in the morning, And I said, no, you got to get him. I want to say goodbye. Because it just seemed too much. So they assured me that they would call him and that he would come. And I had this amazing sense that I just released. It wasn't white lights or anything. It was just a benign state of letting go. But I wasn't able to stay conscious. And but I do remember I woke up and I was back in intensive care, and Larry is pounding on my chest, kind of yelling, "Don't die on me." And so it was a very amazing night with him. Gradually, I realized my fingers and toes were starting to unravel a little bit. And one night, some friends had come over, and as they all arrived, I said, okay, I have something to show you all. And I wanted to surprise everybody, particularly Larry. And Larry was very cute. He said, okay, where do we look? Because he didn't know what the surprise was going to be, if it was a toe. And I'm moving my arm, but I couldn't move my arm. But I said, look at my right hand. And I waved with my little finger, my right finger. And it was so amazing, because that was like the breakthrough, that I could now, with my mind, move a finger, which I hadn't been able to do for weeks. So I had great help in rehab and support with family and friends with this journey. As a young person, I had been a dancer, and then I classical ballet and modern dance, and then I was a marathon runner after I stopped performing. And as you know, I'm a writer, and so I like to write things. And I have to say that I called upon my artist self a lot during these dark days. And once that finger started moving, they wanted to send me off to occupational therapy, where I would move screws and nuts around at the table and try to learn to pick them up with my good finger and move them. And I just thought, well, this is ridiculous. There's no usefulness in this task. So I said, let me go in the computer room, because with my one finger, I could maybe type something. And it became incredible, because it would be hours that I'd be thinking of something I'd like to try to write. And some days there were a word or a sentence, and but I felt like that allowed me to kind of have reassert some authority over that. And as the weeks progressed, I also realized that as people got me out of bed, stood me up, hands under my armpits, and then sat me down in a wheelchair, that actually it seemed like I could stand up, but I didn't have any sensation in my legs. So it was like there was no relationship to the earth. So in rehab, I said, bring the mirror over. I think I can learn to stand up visually. And they're like, well, okay, John, why? We'll bring it over, but the mirror's backwards. And I said, no, as a younger man, I was a dancer, and we learned in the mirror. When a choreographer said a piece on us, we would practice in the mirror. We would see, this is what it looks like. So I said, I think if I can learn to stand up visually, it'll help. So I had a walker, I had braces on my legs, they'd stand me up, I'd be standing in front of the mirror. And I gradually learned that, okay, this is what it means to stand up now. And then after that, they had parallel bars, they put me between them, my arms over it, and the mirror would be at the end of the parallel bars. And then I would try to will back that, even if I had to drag one leg to move. And blessedly, the dancer in me taught my miscreated body how to stand up and walk. I'm so grateful that I had that. So as that was all progressing, they said, okay, how many stairs at your home to get into your front door? And of course, I had never even thought of that, because it was never an issue before. And so Larry went home and counted them and said, there's 6 stairs. They said, okay, in rehab, if you learn how to get up 6 stairs in therapy, we'll think of sending you home. So that became obsessive for me. Now, it wasn't very graceful, and sometimes it was butt up the stairs, and other times it was with the canes. But I worked really hard on that, and it was so thrilling when I thought I got 6 stairs. So they gave Larry and I an afternoon pass to kind of go by ourselves to our house to see what it would be like for him to get me out of the car, put me in the wheelchair, roll the wheelchair up to the front steps, and then me get up the front steps somehow, and then Larry pick up the wheelchair, because we didn't have a ramp. So I don't know, it may have taken 45 minutes to do all of that, and we got in, and I was so happy to be home. And but then I looked at the stairwell upstairs where our bathroom and our bedroom was, and I just started crying, because there were 16 stairs, and I thought, how am I going to do this now? And Larry calmed me, and he said, well, you know how to get up 6 stairs, so get up 6 and we'll rest until we can get up 6 more, and then we'll rest again. So we didn't try it that day. It was pretty daunting how to go from being totally taken care of in the hospital to being totally dependent at home with Larry. But and so at the hospital at this time, my one arm could move, and which was great, but I had to learn how to dress myself with the one arm. So mostly it was loose sweats, and it was like sort of a seal rolling around on the bed. But I eventually learned how to do that, and then also how to sit in a wheelchair and rolled into the shower and use my one hand. So that was good. And then so my birthday was in June, so the goal was, okay, be home by my birthday so I can celebrate with my friends. So we were all set, and the last night in the hospital, they have what is called a transitional apartment, where Larry and I could go, and we would be there completely independent. If there was an emergency, one of us could press a button, or Larry could press the button, but the nursing staff would not come to visit us unless they were called, just to see how it felt to be completely independent of their support. They also, the doctors apologized and said, well, it's completely heterosexual, but there's also some kind of sex tapes for couples dealing with disability that if you want to watch, fine. The sex education, they're not pornographic tapes. And these tapes were so wrong, so outdated, so ridiculous. It was amazing. There was this one scene with a man who's quadriplegic, and his girlfriend or his female partner kind of got in bed gingerly and picked him up like he was a little baby doll and put him on top of her. And I just thought, okay, so for someone like me who had lost sensation and didn't have proprioception anymore, it just seemed that, why is anyone still defining the sexual act for people with disabilities like thrusting and insertion? It just is like, what? It doesn't work. And the other part of the tape is that they were having a cocktail or two together beforehand, a romantic drink. But I was on so many medications, and they warned on all of them, do not mix these medications with alcohol. So it just seems so ill-advised. And this text tape was like, we talked about it on the way out and say, I just throw those tapes out or watch them yourselves and see, because they're not really helpful. Went home, had a nice birthday. Friends came over. It was beautiful. So then we tried to venture out in the world. And I think our first date was to go to a movie, which was, I was looking forward to it, but the movie was on the ground floor. So I thought, oh, this is easy. So we roll in, Larry goes off to sit down. I said, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Seemed to be an accessible bathroom there. So I go to the bathroom, and there's no buttons, accessible doors to open the door. So I got in, but then the door was too heavy. I couldn't get out. So there I am, pounding on the door to get out of the bathroom. So also, it's really complicated. And those of us tonight who are with us, we can talk about this together. But, the world treats people differently in chairs. And when we'd be out together, people would say to Larry, with me sitting in the chair next to him, how is he doing? Like, well, who's the he? John, well, he's right here. Ask him. It's like I wasn't there. And when I would run into colleagues, that people were like, these sympathetic smiles, or kind of they didn't know what to say. And I found that mostly I was needing to reassure people. And that was really complicated. And family came up, and other friends came and helped with chores around the house, bless them, and helped getting me in and out of the house, in the chair, into the car, into the hospital, back in, and also taking me for walks around the block, or wheels around the block. And the generosity was beautiful, but I got to be like a child, because I didn't really know how to ask what I needed. And then with not asking, when people didn't do something, I don't know, it was bizarre. It was like I became petulant or something. It was a very interesting state of relationship. Anyway, eventually I walked more with the cane and the brace on my foot. I decided I'm done with the wheelchair. It was just a hospital loan chair anyway. And so I made Larry bring the wheelchair back to the hospital. And I was careening around with this cane. It was a quad cane. But people seemed I was more stable with the cane than the chair, or more healthy or something. And it was fascinating. I went back to work. I was working at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, and it was gruesome. I just walking to my office was hard. I couldn't go off site anymore to plan events. Nights in the theater were rationed, and I had no social time. So it was a very complicated time to work. At the same time, I got a call from a headhunter firm, the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts is a museum complex in San Francisco. And they did not know, the headhunters, that what had just happened to me. But they called me to see if I'd be interested in interviewing to be the director of the complex. It had 4 galleries, 2 theaters, and a screening room. And so Larry said, let's go talk to your doctor. And, you know, she was amazing. And she said, well, you know, Minnesota winters are pretty intense. And maybe the Bay Area might be easier on your body if you go there. So, you know, I interviewed first by phone and had a great interview, and they invited me out. But my doctor reminded us, well, it's great you're going to go. I think this is great, but you have to practice a few things. Like, go to the Mall of America and bring a suitcase, put books in it to have weight in it. And if you're really going to demand to walk with a cane and not use a wheelchair, then you have to learn how to get on a rolling sidewalk and escalators again. And it was amazing because without this location and stuff, it was really complicated to trust that this moving sidewalk would take me on. Anyway, so we practiced. I went, I got the job. I moved there 6 months after the surgery in November. And we lived there 14 years before moving here to Vermont in 2010. There were many gifts in this. First, I had to immediately stop mourning my old self, my pre-morbid self. There was just too much to do. And, you know, this new community in San Francisco only knew me as disabled. So there was no mourning with my community about what happened to you. And they just knew that I walked with a cane and I shook sometimes. So it was great, but I had to just snap out of it and move forward in my life with that. But I did really want to meet with other disabled people. And the Bay Area is really where the disability rights movement really was born and nurtured and flourishes today even. And so I did find a whole community of Crips that were pretty wonderful. And I did go down to Los Angeles Disability Artists Conference. And it was interesting that most of the folks there, wide range of disabilities, were all wanting to be in Hollywood for some reason. But they were complaining, saying, you know, we're just brought on to teach the Daniel Day-Lewis's how to act crippled. And then they win the Oscars and we're not even on screen. And I was like, well, wait a minute. You know, Hollywood distorts women, distorts queer people. It's like of course they're going to distort us too. But it was fascinating that they wanted to mainstream. I said, no, we got to really start creating our own images. Okay, we don't need to be Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, we can be who we are. I did find that there was this kind of internalized hierarchy as well at this conference, that the quads were actually different than the paras. Those with power chairs were different than those with manual chairs. Those that used walkers were different than people with canes. And then I really saw that race and class and gender and sexual orientation divided us. There was some showing of work, and there was this one woman who was quadriplegic and a comic. Well, she took after Siegfried and Roy, these two queens who did Las Vegas act with tigers. And I was so angry that the whole group was laughing about her parodies of these two gay men. And I was enraged by the homophobia in the room, that no one was calling it out. And my walking self also felt like a pretender in the world. So my My artist self was determined, though, that I was going to work with other like-minded artists. And so my husband, Larry Connolly, and I created a video called Shots, and it was portraits of 6 artists with disabilities. Judy Smith, a dancer, Chris Hewitt, a poet, Terry Galloway, a comedian, Greg Wallach, a monologuist, and Bill Shannon, a hip-hop dancer, all of them with disabilities, and myself. I also worked with a wonderful co-editor named Bob Guter, and we put a book together called Queer Crips, Disabled Gay Men and Their Stories. And what I wanted to do was create this compilation of writing so that psychologist back in Minnesota, if anyone ever came in there and had any questions, she could have that book as a reference, because one didn't exist. So we gathered a lot of great, powerful writing about the realities of disability. And it was fascinating. The gay presses told us, well, without buff men or lipstick lesbians, there's no market for this book. So we started talking to the disability presses. And those tonight that are from the disability community, you know the term inspiration porn. And that the media often just wants to look at the happy, well-adjusted Crips among us who are rolling out of their vans and happily adjusted to everything. And the disability presses would say, no, we only want to do the positive side. So we got turned down by, I think, over 30 houses to do it. Finally, Hayworth Press did publish the book. And it was really people dealing with catastrophic, dark issues. The great thing was 2004. It won a Lambda Literary Award for Best Anthology that year, and it's still included in gay and disability studies in many universities. So I'm proud of that. Now, year after that, Larry was coming up to Christmas, and I said, well, what would you like for Christmas? And he said, well, that's hard. I said, well, why? What do you want? He said, well, he said, I hesitate to say this, but what I'd really like for Christmas is for you to get a wheelchair, so we could do more things together. We could shop together, browse books. We could even take the dog on long walks, because right now we drive to the water, you sit down on a bench, I take the dog for a walk, I meet you at the bench, and we walk next to the car. I was very conflicted. I agreed. But then he and I worked on this video called Dreaming Awake. And it really was a prayer of reconciliation about my body and the wheelchair. So it's a video I'm gonna share with you. It's 5.5 minutes long, but please note there's nudity in the work. So it's not sexual at all. So anyway, we'll show this 5-minute video.
I dissociate from the burning in my legs, silently crying between sleep and the morning. Hopes and dreams keep me safe through the night. After surgery, I died then, but you refused and brought me back. 7 years and counting, of tilting toward the ground. I'm afraid if I sit down, I will never get up again. The dancer in me learned to stand visually. The marathoner took the second step. Rehab gave me strength and range of motion, but with each new modality, I interrupt expectations. Improvements are not cures. If I sit down, I will never get up again. Still imagining a body I cannot have, I startled myself, glimpsing fatigue in passing windows. My bifurcated body torques with every stride. Neuropathy and weariness debilitates. Therapists caution about wear and tear, while friends cheer, you're getting better. If I sit down, I will never get up again. Navigating deadened limbs and twisted trunk, Pain remains constant, dulling our life together. After a day's activities, I have no comfort left to give you. Living through chemistry, libido is gone. Holding and touching you, I long for remembered sensations. I'm afraid if I sit down, I'll never get up again. If I sit down, I'll never get up again. In this metaphorical body, I try to intercept suffering, abide in discomfort, forgive the trauma. Bearing witness, I sit with loss, move towards unobstructed feeling, and bring you along into my dreaming awake.
I think as the titles roll out, say that what I wanted to do is work with all these artists with disabilities, but I said to them, let's not use any of our apparatus because society defines us with our chair or our crutches or our walkers or our canes. Let's try to do something with just our bodies. And so this piece, I'm very blessed. It's been shown all over the world. It's in some collections, and I'm really glad to share it with you tonight. Thank you for that. Larry and I have continued making videos. We did one called Holding On about partners and how couples' relationships change with disability. So cellist Joan Jean Renault, painter Catherine Sherwood featured their partners along with Larry and I. And society often emphasizes with those who are disabled, and the caregivers don't get any thought that they're living with disability too. So it was important for me. And then the reason I'm here is I have this new book called Because Art, and there are a number of disabled artists featured. Eli Clare, our poet from Vermont, Kenny Freeze, a writer, comedian Terry Galloway, and dancer Judy Smith. It's really, these are some of my heroes. Judy and I did an interview in the book called The Cultural Apartheid of Disability, and we really looked at, even 30 years after the ADA, that most cultural organizations think that, ramps and the back row seats, is accommodation and inclusion. But, architectural access is not inclusion. And we have so much work to do with audio description, with captions to videos, brochures. How many websites are actually screen reader compatible? In live performances, sometimes ASL is accommodated, but sometimes people want audio description. And I can't tell you how many choreographers said, why would anyone come to a dance performance and have it audio described? And it's like, well, then you don't want blind people to come. And why not? And we also did something sensory friendly adaptations of performances for families with folks on the autism spectrum. And what we found was these kinds of accommodations help everybody, right? Surprise, but they help everybody. They're not special at all. Museums are sometimes the worst offenders in this. I remember we went to Mass MoCA and the button was broken on the front door. And so I had to, in my chair, have my legs straight out in front of me and kick the damn door open to go into a museum. Most galleries still hang art 61 inches centered from the floor, which is eye standing level. And it's like, no, we have to accommodate between those of us that stand and those of us that sit. And so it really is about 58 inches to the center. And whenever I hang things like that in exhibitions, artists go, well, wait, it's not eye level. And it's like, well, your eye level is irrelevant in this. This is the public's eye level. Audio description of work is important, and labels in galleries are so small that they're not readable. Inclusive Arts Vermont does an incredible job, and they've been training so many of us in the cultural sector. So I love them, right? They're an incredible organization. Inclusion is a civil rights issue, but I think what the arts community has to learn is it also an organizational asset that benefits all of us. This kind of advocacy also is pertinent to what I do in the Vermont House of Representatives. I am sitting up my general housing military affairs is my legislative assignment, but I'm also on the discrimination prevention panel. And we actually invited in people from the disabled communities to come in and tell us about access and accommodation issues from their experience. And we saw there is serious training that's needed for our staff and legislators to more appropriately invite us. Their accommodation is terrible for people to come and testify for public hearings. And also, we are out of compliance federally with not having a centralized contact person for anyone who wants accommodation requests. So we're working on all those things. There's some kind of strange things that the traditions in the state house, is when you're first sworn in, the people who've already been there before keep their same seat, and then the new people walk in and they pick whatever seat is still open. So when I was elected in 2018, I said, well, that's not going to work for me because I walk with a cane and I need an aisle seat. Well, no one had ever asked for an aisle seat before. And so some of the other tenured legislators, well, that's not how we do it. I said, well, since 1990, you should have been doing it that way. So let's start now. We had a Disability Awareness Day where we invited people, and one of our visitors and chair came up to me and said, we've just been told that the people in the wheelchairs have to be outside the body of the house and listening. I said, no. So I had to go, and of course people were welcomed in, but people just didn't know what to do with that. So there's a lot of work left for all of us to do in this world, and I'm proud to be part of it. I'd like to end, if I may, with reading a short piece. It's called Night Swimming, and then we'll open up for questions. And Michelle's going to look at the questions and just feed them to me, so I'm not looking around everywhere. So, anyway, this is written in 2004. By day, I'm an arts warrior, public servant, heroic crip, open, responsive, cocksure, ambitious. I seize the public gaze as a bully pulpit. Offstage finds me enslaved by quivering muscles contorting my stride. After surgery, my swollen spine shut down. Gurus and saints abounded, but no roses from above. Paralyzed weeks turned into months, a flicker, a twitch, a wave. sitting to standing, 6 steps to go home with wheelchair, ankle brace, and cane. Gestures repeat to imprint, but gravity intervenes. Syncopated embellishments focus spatial awareness, though alignment remains akimbo. With little sensation, each footstep is defiant. Only in the pool can I run with the ponies again. 8 years now, I still fixate on atrophy, ignoring progress, balancing rehab and recovery, clinging to a reconnection. Physical therapy and pharmaceuticals combat lost kinesis, encouraging hope. Night murmurs locate points of pleasure behind the left knee, above the nipple. I crawl inside the softness, relishing the incandescent kundalini rush, absent pain. Legs lie quiet. The burning subsides. Stillness embraces me. In the extra room that we do not have, I plie and pirouette with dramatic abandon, leaving behind my imploded, twisted carcass. The tumor does not return. My pelvis aligns. Depression dissipates. Then I awake. Violent spasms hurl me out of body. Heart and breath stop. I stare down at my contorted, gaping hole of a mouth and rehearse death, porous and seductive. Floating in the space between, I no longer fear dying, only waiting. Stolen shadows hover. It seems easy, one breath away, but it is so hard to surrender into the void, although I am well practiced, writing libretti for lost lives in vigils through the night and surviving my own demise, time and again. Larry carries me back once more through his weight, touch, and voice. Unfettered love makes the journey familiar and secure. No past, no future, just present. Grasping for now, I pray for clear seeing, acceptance without judgment. Morning comes. I amble toward the light. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. And I would be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, John. Your first question comes from Elizabeth, and it came in when you were talking about going up the stairs. And
Yes.
She says, I feel this, John. You are lucky to have such a great cheerleader at your side.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Eric is your next question. And they say, are you planning to run on a national level of politics?
I so love being hyper local. So no, thank you. Thank you, Eric. No.
It's not to know then.
Good to know.
Judith wants to say fantastic presentation and thank you so much. And Keith would like to know, is Queer Crips still available?
Well, online, yes, Queer Crips. It's been out of print for a long time, but when you go to my book is available at all the Phoenix books in Vermont, in Essex and Burlington and Rutland. And if you even go there, you can see other books by me, and it says you can get one, but you know their price is like $50 or something. So it is available, but it's not really. You can get it through Amazon or Phoenix, but it's, I had 2 extra copies, so I brought them down to Phoenix when we had my new book come out, and I said, just in case, and they were gone in a day. But I said, oh no, the new book's $20. The old book should be $20 too. So those quickly moved.
Okay. Jen would like to say, John, you are a true artist. I knew part of the story, but seeing the connection between your art and your story deepens it so much. Thank you for your story.
You're welcome.
And we'll see if any other questions come in. I have a very kind of a technical question about like what happened with your body in recovery, that when you first came out of surgery, they said, get used to it. And then here you are. Like, did your spinal kind of column grow back? How did that happen?
No. It's the Brown's acquired syndrome is just a fluke because it was at C2. If it was at C1, it would be like where Christopher Reeve was injured. If it's C3, other things would happen. It's at C2, it's only when the spine bifurcates that the body does these kinds of things. I had a very supportive partner. I've talked about throughout, Larry Connolly. And in rehab, they warned us that couples, not just gay couples, but all couples, when they have something catastrophic happen, often the relationship is torn apart because it's, for better or worse, you don't imagine the worst. But I had someone by my side who stays by my side and is totally supportive. And that helps to have that. I had good medical care, and I think I mentioned earlier that in '96, the majority of cases that the medical establishment was used to were people who had been stabbed or shot in the spine, were often very poor. And so they didn't have access to the same kind of care and rehabilitation I did. I also have to say my discipline training as a dancer was really helpful, that I was able to work very intentionally. And then, I ran marathons I did 6 marathons, and you don't worry at the 17-mile mark, how are you feeling? Because you got to go over the 26-mile mark. So that training really helped me to go in front of that mirror and think, if I can move my one foot, I'm going to figure out how to do this. It doesn't matter to me how many months it takes, and it took months to be able to really walk again. I still have the same issues. If we're walking down the street together and I'm with my cane, if I don't watch where my foot is, my brain does not know where my left foot is, and I'll just trip along the street. And you'll see me and I kind of careen along. I go slow. It's kind of great to go slow in the world, though.
You do have some more questions. Can you speak briefly, says Sarah, about Inclusive Arts Vermont and what they do and how to reach them?
Well, Inclusive Arts Vermont, their office is in Essex. If you just go, and if you can use Google, just go there and find them, you'll find a way to them. And they have great exhibitions of artists with disabilities. There's a new one up that's touring the state right now called Masked, MASKED. But they have taught the entire arts community about how to really do true integration of inclusion and access in programs. And they are incredible. They also have teacher training of artists with disabilities going into classrooms and modeling things. They host a lot of things for families. And they also, and this is really important, that they also host artist gatherings together. Because one thing that happens with artists with disabilities is that everybody gets the sympathy review. Oh, isn't that great? Or, I mentioned that the comic who took off after Siegfried and Roy. Well, she missed her punchline. And no one at that conference was going to tell the quadriplegic comic she wasn't funny. But that's exactly what we need to challenge and build with each other to increase our standards. And Judy Smith, who I mentioned, was the founder of Access Dance Company in California, and they've come to Vermont many times. At first, it was a therapeutic group that would get together, and it'd be people with and without disabilities that would do improv jams together. And it was really great. And then they wanted to tell disability stories. And but the reviewers didn't even want to review them and said, well, it's therapy. And eventually, as the company progressed, Judy decided she was going to invite choreographers that didn't have disabilities to come and work with them. And by doing that, it increased the level, the quality, and the standards in a way, because it was a different kind of conversation. And I think that's another really important thing that Inclusive Arts Vermont does, is artists can talk about how they are making their work and what that's like, and that they can learn from each other. And if they have questions, they can ask people about this kind of stuff. You know, and it's essential for all of us as artists to be challenged, to be mentored, to be nurtured, to be supported, and also to turn to someone and be mentored. It's, I think, essential, and so they do some of that. They're great people, so I hope you contact them.
Melinda wants to know, can you tell us a little bit more about the power of Raindrop in your healing, and how often you and Raindrop spend together, and how much do you mean to one another?
Oh, well, I don't see names on the questions, so I think this may be my friend Melinda Moulton.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, bless you, Melinda. And
but Keith is also asking about Raindrop.
Okay, well, great, Keith, thank you. I have a Shetland pony that people, some of you know about, and there's in my book also, there's chapters about her. And I grew up and I rode horses, and I also had, when I was 9 years old, sort of a spirit pony named Raindrop, who was my Shetland pony love. And so when I lost the use of my legs, I couldn't ride anymore, because riding a horse, you really need your legs. But I realized with Shetland ponies and carts, when you drive a horse or a pony in a cart, you don't use your legs. So I have my 400-pound pony, and she's at a barn in Williston. I see her every day. If I'm going to the legislature, sometimes it's at 6 in the morning, sometimes it's at 7 at night, but I see her every day. And for 10 years, we drove together 3 or 4 times a week. And it is the one time that I'm not disabled, because I'm flying in this cart with this pony, and we're dancing again as we're moving around the arena and stuff. And it is the most glorious relationship I have. And, you know, whenever I go there, she greets me with a whinny. And nothing's better than be totally loved and saying hello no matter what. And once you go to, those of us that have horses, once you go to a barn, you're not Representative Killacky, you're not the guy that runs a Flynn, you're Raindrop's dad, and you just talk about the animals. And the teenagers know more than I do. And it is so great to be in that situation, that you're a learner. And you have to be totally with the animal. No matter how good or bad your day was, the animal doesn't care. You have to show up. And I have learned so much from this creature. I was there today, and oh, I'm one lucky person. And Melinda has met my pony, and her granddaughter drove in the car with me, and I'm a very lucky person.
Well, thank you, John. We've got thank yous and lovely presentations. I think that wraps it up for tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us. I wish we were in person, but I'm grateful, Michelle, to your library, and I'm grateful to the Humanities Council. So thanks so much.